Donald J. Trump does not slam tariffs on Russia, but his war against the rest of the world can grind down the Kremlin's oil-addicted economy anyway. The other topic is Russia's spring offensive has already begun, says Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky. Good afternoon, my name is Henry Keane and we are UATV English, an English-speaking Ukrainian state media in constant persuasion every day to deliver the hardest of truth in easiest of terms for you, for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. United States President Donald Trump has inadvertently hit Russia's economy after his Liberation Day tariffs caused oil prices to drop drastically on April 7th, with potentially massive ramifications for the Kremlin's ability to fund its ongoing war in Ukraine. Russia has so far failed to agree to a full ceasefire, and while Trump has been vocal about being pissed off and very angry with the Kremlin, he is yet to take any concrete action to force Russia to end its full-scale invasion. I really doubt he will, but he can, as he has multiple forms of leverage he could use against the Kremlin, like increasing military aid to Ukraine is one, another strengthening the enforcement of existing sanctions already, or imposing additional tariffs on countries that buy Russian oil. So far, he has not used any of that, but his Liberation Day tariffs imposed on nearly every country in the world, but notably not Russia, may end up forcing Russian dictator Putin to reconsider his options. And the Kremlin is already panicking. Russia's economy is heavily dependent on oil revenues, that's why, which make up around 30% of its total state budget. As the war in Ukraine has dragged on, the Kremlin has massively increased defense spending, and 32% of the 2025 budget expenditures was allocated to the military and its war machine in Ukraine, obviously. But here's an issue. When drawing up the 2025 budget, the Kremlin budgeted for an oil price of $70 per barrel. But on April 7th, the price of Russian euros will tumble to a 21-month low of 51.5 per barrel. On the Baltic port of Primorsk, by the way, according to Argus Media. If the average price is lower than $70 per barrel throughout the year, Russia will have less money to earn and spend, especially to cover growing expenses connected to legal actions against Ukraine, says Wojciech Jakubek, a Warsaw-based energy analyst, told the Kyiv Independent. Russia's national wealth fund would be depleted faster and Russia would need a truce quicker, he adds, obviously. So what exactly is going on? Trump has a plan, maybe that is the plan, but highly unlikely. Still, it's a small planet, as you can see, and even not calling specifically a spade and a thug, even not tariffing that very thug directly. If your war chest consists on 1/3 of oil revenues and that revenue plummets drastically, you will just have less money, whether that was the plan or was it not. Russia's new spring offensive against Ukraine has actually already begun. Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky says that in an interview with LBUA outlet published on April 9th. Syrsky's comments came after President Volodymyr Zelensky warned that Moscow is amassing forces for fresh offensive against Kharkiv and Sumy Oblast this spring.
I can say that the president is absolutely right, and this offensive has actually already begun. Alexander Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of Ukrainian Armed Forces.
For nearly a week, Russian offensive operations have almost doubled in all main sectors, the Commander-in-Chief noted. Ukrainian officials and experts have been warning that Russia may launch a new offensive against the two northern eastern regions to strengthen its hand in potential negotiations. The development comes after Russia recaptured much of its territory in Kursk Oblast, a Russian border region Kyiv attacked last year to disrupt plans for an offensive against Sumy Oblast. US President Donald Trump has sought to broker a ceasefire in Ukraine, but Moscow has rejected the 30-day truce agreed upon by Washington and Kyiv and continues its onslaught, hoping to use the time to seize more territory over Ukraine. Russia has made some significant advances on the battlefield, indeed primarily in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk Oblast last fall, but its push had slowed down in the early months of 2025. When asked whether the upcoming Zapad, which means West in English, Zapad 2025 drills in Belarus in September could be part of preparations for the new offensive, Syrsky acknowledged that military exercises can be used to redeploy and amass a new group of forces. At the same time, the Ukrainian commander-in-chief does not expect that the full exercises will be used for that purpose, though Kiev has to take this factor into account. But what about Europe? I'm sorry. Anything? I mean, don't get me wrong. There is a lot of sound, a lot of noise, massive amounts of talking, massive. Coalition of the willing, gathering of resilient, summit of the collaborations, meeting of the brave, branch of the strong, council of the potent, conclave of the forceful, and so far and so on endlessly, and nothing so far. I mean, not a thing actually done enough. Some money, yes. Some effort, yes. Some things, but never enough. Never decisive enough action. Like Germany and Poland could have shelled the hell out of Russian military bases, for example, after Russian missiles have many times provocatively crossed airspace of the European Union, thus exercising UN Charter Article 5. But nothing. America is mute and will be mute. As Trump wants to trade with Russia, and Ukraine is a commodity for him. We in Ukraine have to realize that and accept that and act accordingly. I mean, hey, these are the new rules. And Trump's example of doing whatever the hell Putin wants, it's a game for two, actually. The only one who cares for Ukraine is Ukraine. Let's stop pretending Europe or the United States will save us. No, they won't. They're too busy. One in America, with rate of ignorance against intellect so rabid that his own apologetic Elon Musk is even rising against him. The others in Europe, they talk coalitions and fiery speeches, and what comes out of it is not enough, not only to stop Putin. It is not enough even for those talkers to believe in what they are actually talking about. I mean, you only listen to these talkers. They did a fund in Europe where they can borrow money for defense needs. I mean, like, it is a legitimate and very convenient financial tool indeed in times of peace. And they are actually seriously intended to use it against a bloodthirsty Russian monster who kills children with cluster munitions. They're going to borrow money and rearm, which will take years. And they already now start discussing like interest rate and terms and conditions. Putin can't take Europe like that. Because there is no NATO. NATO is a paper tiger and is unlikely to even roar, let alone to react to Article 5 violation, otherwise than just talk it over. Well, here is the hard truth in very plain terms for all of us. Economically and militarily, yes. Europe has $27 trillion economy at hand and is a huge military force. And it is capable of wiping Russians back to Russia in a week. However, politically, Europe is a rich, lazy, spoiled, arrogant, slow, and corrupted. And not only Europe, the United Nations Security Council, for example, which is presided by Russia, is the epitome of corruption and criminal inaction. Antonio Guterres is no matador, but a Russian doormat. So are all these Fitos and Orbans and Marie Le Pens and Alternative für Deutschland and all these badly covered Russian assets. And even the best of Europe, like Emmanuel Macron, give with one hand and take back with the other, blocking another military aid tranche for Ukraine of 60 billion euro. It could end quickly, and maybe it will. And it will exactly the moment when old Soviet dwarf Vlad Putin in big Moscow's Kremlin will actually realize that not only can he invade Baltic countries, for example, but the whole of Europe is just laying at his little feet as slaves like Marie Le Pen and Orban and Fico has already did their sabotage job. And idiots and bourgeois are asking their reasonable questions like, why fight in a war while we can trade in a market? Well, because the trade commodity is your freedom, you fools. I know you don't need it because you never exercised it, so you are pretty much not even aware it exists. So why bother then, right? And yes, of course, Europe is free and is democratic, while Russia is not. Here is why for you. The very fact that so many pro-Kremlin forces and voices can raise their Russian voices in Europe is speaking clearly for that. Europe is democratic. They can do that only in a free and democratic country. Imagine Putin's opposition in Russia raising their voices against Putin. Well, remember Nemtsov? Remember Navalny? How fast do you think they would have been jailed or murdered, I wonder? All that is leading us to a question. Even with all that Trump's mayhem that seemed to awaken Europe, has it awakened really? Well, let's ask someone who might know. A Lithuanian politician and diplomat who served as Lithuania's Minister of Foreign Affairs, someone of stunning expertise in political sobriety of sorts. How was that? Consider it coming out. My personal political crush. I give you Gabrielius Landsbergis in his own persona of Lithuania. You're very much welcome, sir. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Right. So, the internet and people I know say that your career was focused on strengthening Lithuania's ties with NATO and United States. If I would say that Donald Trump just ruined all your efforts in 2 months, all your years-long efforts, would you agree to that statement?
Well, I would not agree with the part where too much burden is put on my shoulders.
Okay.
I was.
What was the path?
No, I mean it is clearly not my. You cannot single out a person or even a country in the
True.
region that was that spent decades in building up the relationship with the United States. It is clearly, it has been a bedrock of our geopolitical thinking
Right.
in our region, that we base our security, defense, even trade for Lithuania has been, it was based on our relationship with the United States. So I probably would say I humbly continued the tradition of the predecessors, who started the same and were doing exactly the same thing as I did. And the tradition, as I said, it's a regional one. So that this part, needs to be specified.
It was clearly a provocation.
Of course.
A friendly provocation for an interview, but I understand what you're talking about. I am Latvian, so I was born and raised Latvia. So the Baltic states, Baltic countries rely on NATO. What now is my question? Are we still there? Is there still NATO?
Well, my answer usually to this is that it's until somebody, in NATO would declare that, that they are no longer going to defend other allies, basically, and undermining the Article 5. It's not up to us to, to answer this question. But my biggest worry is that the person who might answer this question does not come from the alliance. That this person is Vladimir Putin,
Right.
who can, because now, if you think about it, he is in quite a good position to ask himself a question. Is NATO still there? Is Article 5 still functional? Because he's been witnessing probably the biggest change, geopolitical change in his whole career. I mean, okay, we might consider that the fall of Soviet Union was something greater, but still, in the modern time, this is the biggest reallocation of
Absolutely.
of partnerships. So for him, he might have a question. If I attack Baltic states, would United States come to their help? And
Would they?
and
Would
the
they
last
come?
and the last couple of months might give him an idea that the situation is where he might try and do that, without risking U.S. reaction. So indeed, and that spells a very dangerous time for us on the eastern flank.
Indeed, it does. Well, the reason I asked that previous tricky question was, let's discuss one thing. very concrete thing. UK's Joint Weapons Fund. Could you please talk me through what is that? What is the purpose? What is the instruction manual? How can Baltic states benefit from that? Can they?
The European fund. Could you repeat the question? I mean, the
Yeah,
first one.
there was a United Kingdom's Joint Weapons Fund. Well, there's a European ones, is that obviously.
Look, there are many ideas as to how Europe could, in theory, defend itself, without the United States.
Mm.
And if they decide to leave or they change their posture,
Right,
and
right,
one
right.
of them is, United Kingdom offering ideas, and I personally think that it's a right thinking, and we clearly need United Kingdom back in the security environment of Europe. We clearly need them, and I appreciate the efforts. Unfortunately, nothing so far has yet materialized in any form, so that we would be, that we would know that this is really happening.
Mm.
Um, the only now specific plan, okay, let's call it like that, which is workable, is what has been called the Rearm Europe. Now it's changed the name for reasons that I'm not entirely aware of, which allows countries to borrow more for their security. And it has some good points in it, and then some not so good points in it. So the good point is that Ukraine will be able to participate in this program. United Kingdom, though, not so much. But so bringing in Ukraine, that's a very important part. The worst part is that, again, it leaves the defense of Europe at the hands of the countries that are most at risk, or basically those who
Absolutely.
are, the frontline countries that are defending Europe, or should be or could be defending Europe if there's an attack on us, on European continent further. So that means that the countries further to the south, they will say, okay, this is, the bombs are not flying over over Madrid or
Mm.
or Rome, and therefore we might not be doing as much as, for example, countries like Poland or Lithuania are doing. So it loses the solidarity element that for Europeans, at least as far as I consider, has been always a paramount thing.
So, I mean, I've been talking to people here and on Munich Security Conference to quite high profilers. My it's not the opinion. I'm a reporter, I'm a journalist, so I'm collecting opinions. But I'm still struggling to understand one thing. Is Europe awakened finally? Because it makes me feel like it was World War One and the same year. World War Two, still the same. As we are on the brink of the World War Three, if not already in full force, still the same thing. Talking, fans trying to appease the monster instead of fighting it, not clearly understanding the position of Baltic states, just by the way, why they're so pro-Ukrainian. Not they, we are not so pro-Ukrainian, but we are pro ourselves because we've been there. We know what it is like being under the Soviet food, and Russia is still a Soviet country. So is Europe doing something but talking right now? Because if Putin decides, I mean, it could be tomorrow. What then?
Yeah, and unfortunately, we have not yet woken up.
Right.
I've seen a change in, um, in thinking in some of the countries. One of the best examples probably would be Germany, where
Indeed.
most of the talk, in during the formation of a new incoming government is about the defense.
Right.
An enormous fund is being created to fast forward Germany from from where they are currently into a defensive power of Europe. That is a
Right.
change. There's no denying. We've seen a dramatic shift in the Nordic thinking, among the Nordic countries who have been, now are all part of NATO, after Finland and
Mm.
Sweden joining, are among the top supporters of Ukraine. And I mean, so there is shift And so when we talk about Europe, and if I criticize Europe, sometimes I'm getting a backlash from countries that would say, look, but you've seen where Sweden was 5 years ago and where Sweden currently is, and same goes for Germany. And yeah, I have to admit that is a fact. But if you take Europe as a continent that has institutions, that guide the way that continent functions as an entity, unfortunately, this entity has not yet woken up. And I'm truly worried, because if the situation does deteriorate further, and as you say, if Putin does indeed, is eager to continue, and we believe that he is,
Absolutely, I believe so.
it could be the last test of Europe that we are just not prepared to pass.
We just failed.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try to solve the dilemma. What the Europe should do you think? Let's slide into Germany. Maritime civilians in a very concrete case. The sudden underwater, all of a sudden, cables damage and all this Russian sabotage, which is Russian sabotage, obviously. Germany upgrades farm radars to enhance security. What is Lithuania doing about that?
Well, again, it's for a small country like Lithuania, in many cases, it is difficult at this stage to have a proper response. This is the reason why we are part of NATO and part of European Union, so that we would have a ability to have a collective response. Because now
I'm getting it absolutely, because I'm getting one and the same, more or less the same answer from my Latvian counterparts. I'm talking, not counterparts, my interlocutors. But maybe we should be thinking about doing something together as three, or nothing changes. All right, let's put it that way. Let's say that you are a NATO Secretary General from tomorrow. What would you do?
Well, I think that first thing that we should be doing as NATO alliance, we should be signaling to Russia that this will get a response from the alliance, and we have means to send a clear response.
Right.
The worry was for our big allies in NATO have been worried that militarization of response to hybrid attacks, would lead to escalation, and this was, kind of completely an area where nobody in NATO would wanted to venture, and it led to actual escalation by Russians, meaning that we've allowed them, without proper response, we've allowed them to do things that they've been doing, and they continue doing that. They continue cutting cables and doing whatever they are doing in our country, because they understand that there will be no response to their actions. So we should be sending a different sort of signal that, look, there will be an answer. There is no area, and now even the latest developments in NATO, where it was deemed that hybrid events should be taken care at the country level. It already sends to Russians a signal that, look, you can then go to Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania and deal with them, because there is no alliance that shields them from these sort of attacks. So you can cut a cable, you can bring in an incendiary device and try to burn down the building. There will be no response, because Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia are just too small to find a proper response to a nuclear power in the region. That's doing these things, in our backyard. So this is a very problematic thing. I think that we've lost this battle so far. The arguments have not sunken in that, look, we need to have an answer, proper answer to Russians. And look, the only time when the Article 5 was used in 2001 after September 11th attacks, you could call that was also a hybrid attack, right?
Of sorts, right? Of sorts, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I agree.
So that means that it is possible to have a NATO response, a military response to a terrorist attack, and we have terrorist attacks on our soil.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, they're different in scale. There's no denying that, and I'm not going to go there. I mean, I'm not suggesting, we've sent out all the troops like we did to Afghanistan, but at least we could do something.
Oh, it's a very dire strait. It's a very dire situation to me. I mean, it could be improved, but it is not getting any closer to improvement. So, if I'll ask a question, what would we do? What shall we do? I mean, Europe is more or less like to dwell in in a state of utter shock. But what about the tariffs? I'm not so much aware if you. Um, I mean, really, I mean, experienced enough to talk in this area. Me is also not. I'm not experienced, but I again collecting the opinions. Tariffs, war. Should Europe retaliate, or should Europe again just keep silent? Because it seems to me that we are not. We, as a collective entity of Europe, is not responding to any threat politically, militarily, economically. We're just reacting and. Uh, doing most of the time nothing.
Yeah, you see the way that tariffs work, and I mean, why Europe has was unable until now to find a way how to respond to declare trade war, was that for tariffs, it's the customers that pay.
Right, that is true.
Yeah, so President Trump, he declared that now every day there are like, I don't know, $1 billion, $3 billion, dollars are
Right.
coming
This,
in from the imposed tariffs. I mean, the only thing that he did not mention is that the Americans are paying these billions every single
but this
day.
is so obvious. This is so
Yeah, but I mean,
obvious.
if you try to kind of avoid it, maybe there will be enough people who will kind of not think about it, or they will believe that this is not happening, right? But
Right.
my point is that people will see it in their, when they pay their bills, when they pick up stuff in the grocery store. They will see that the things are just more expensive. So for Europe, it's a tough question. Do we want to to tariff our own customers, our own
Right.
people, in Europe, who are purchasing stuff from the United States, and are we willing to to ask them to pay more? So I understand that Italian Prime Minister has been asked to go to Washington to have a conversation with Donald Trump. She has been seen as an envoy. That's my understanding. I mean, just from the public sources,
Right. Sure.
she's going
Yeah.
because von der Leyen was not able to reach out. So that means that Europe has to have an envoy. And clearly, people thought that Meloni probably has the best contact with President Trump.
I
So they
just only
asked her.
have she wears a proper suit. That's all.
Yeah, could be that. Could be that. And anyway, so I think that there will be attempts to try and smooth things over.
Mm.
I'm not too convinced that this will work. I'm more looking for the pressures that will be built inside the United States, where the people will actually start, they will feel the pressure. They will feel the pressure of the price tag of at the shop, and this is how the things
Mm.
might then start to be reversed back.
Well, I mean, I have a whole bunch of questions. You're indeed a very nice interlocutor, and I like your light-hearted attitude and deep experiences in things you're talking about, which is this is exactly what world lacks tonight, because people like to like this Ukrainian-born lawmaker Victoria Stans, for example. Uh, she says, like, if I'm bored, I mean, it's so exquisitely stupid to say that a duck and a fighter jet are the same thing just because they're all both airborne, that I don't know what to say. I mean, and this is what the reaction is from someone I know in Europe, in America, that we are in a state of utter shock. We don't know what to say. We don't know how to react to that. I mean, let's put the tariffs on our own ass and see what happens. Oh, right, let's do that. And it seems to be like on a war to ourselves. But or we can be smiling, we can be discussing that here in those cozy interview rooms, but Putin is watching. And he, exactly as you said, he's looking at us and says, well, why not to say Baltic? Maybe I don't need those Baltic countries, but why not to seize them? Why not to try if there is no NATO? And I'm very much afraid of that we are going to see that there is no NATO when Putin is already there. So that's mine.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I mean, the whole world is in flux right now. The situation is changing so rapidly that if you were to ask a question like hypothetically, if certain scenario is plausible, and you would name any scenario, right? Geopolitical war scenario, countries breaking down or whatever, I would be unable to say that this is something that would definitely not happen. Because there is just so much change, and could there be an attack on Taiwan? Yeah, probably it could.
Probably,
because we don't know what sort of calculation the Chinese are currently making, right? They might start thinking that, okay, the world is distracted. Everybody's doing and trying to figure out their own stuff, right? Because of tariffs, because of the war.
Not? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe this is an opportunity, right? So a lot of people are in this mode, and it is a very dangerous world indeed.
All right. Well, it's good to have someone like you and me who know that, and maybe we can try to figure out the way out of this international mayhem. I'm just, flattering myself from time to time. I like to do that. Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, thank you so very much, and promise me we're going to do that sometime again when you have time. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, that's it for tonight. My name is Henry Keane, and we are UATV English, an English-speaking Ukrainian state media in an everyday constant persuasion to deliver hard truth in easy terms for you, for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. We ask in return, like, share, and comment. We need your voice. Your voice matters as it helps Ukrainian voice to be heard globally. Meanwhile, stay safe and see you very soon. Thank you.